The French Revolution was one of the bloodiest uprisings in a country's history. Inspired by the victory that the United States had against Britain, the French in 1789 wanted to see a change in their country equally as successful. During this time, the goals of the revolution were constantly changing depending on specific events and the need of the people and the government. After a severe financial crisis and poverty throughout the country in 1788, the French finally decided that they could take no more. The moderate phase sparked the revolution with its inspiration to rid the country of their financial downfall and to spread equality throughout the government and people. The phase began with Louis XVI calling a meeting of the Estates General or French Parliament after having been inactive for over 100 years. The first issue of inequality rose with the voting of the three estates. The third estate, consisting of the upper middle class known as the bourgeoisie, which made up the vast majority of the estates in total, yet they could not be voted by the other two states, which were the nobles and the clergy. In efforts to gain equality, they proposed a different voting system that the king rejected, so that they decided to form another group called the National Assembly after storming of the Bastille in efforts to give some power back to the commoners. In 1789, the National Assembly vowed to draft a constitution for equality among men, known as the Tennis Court Oath. They also created several key documents in efforts to try and rid the king of power and gain freedom and equality back to the people. As the advancements of the moderate phase continued, the goals began to change due to the events taking place. The National Assembly changed the government once again by completing a new constitution in 1791, which instituted a limited monarchy and created a legislative assembly consisting of representatives. The goals of the country were beginning to change from equality within the government to changing it entirely. Many countries feared that the idea of a revolution would spread to their own, which led the Legislative Assembly to declare war on Austria in 1792. The war led to a new government being established known as the Paris Commune, which started a new phase of the revolution.
The radical phase is one of the most memorable phases of the revolution because it was the bloodiest. It began with the Paris Commune putting together a national convention which was to decide France's new form of government. The convention made a decision to draft yet another constitution, abolishing the monarch and creating a republic in efforts to rid the king of his power. Their next goal was to decide the fate of the king. He was condemned to death on the guillotine in 1793. This sparked a new crisis in the radical phase to rid the country and surrounding ones who supported Louis XVI. Many revolts and rebellions arose among the people of France in response to the killing of their king. The National Convention formed a Committee of Public Safety in 1793 to stop the violence towards the government. However, the committee started killing the people who weren't for the Republic. This period was known as the Reign of Terror. The government tried to win the people over that the Republic was a good idea by creating new social laws and gaining economic control. This was done by price limits on goods, abolishment of slavery, and de-Christianization. To ensure that the Republic would stand, the Committee of Public Safety created a strong French army to defend against surrounding countries and also establish a form of checks and balances within their government. In efforts to control laws, the National Legislative Assembly created a directory. As these events were taking place, a new man was rising to power through the military.
The radical phase began to dwindle due to its many failed efforts. A man named Napoleon Bonaparte took power by a sudden overtake of government called a coup d'etat, and thus began the Napoleonic phase of the revolution. This phase consisted of Napoleon's efforts to establish equality in a controlled government and gain power back to France after its many defeats. After seeing countless failures of the past governments, Napoleon was determined to create a new working republic. This new government, called the Consulate, was formed after abolishing the Directory, and Napoleon deemed himself absolute ruler while still calling France a republic. The first goal of Napoleon was to initiate peace with the Catholic Church and to make a single set of ruling laws for the nation. He installed a civil code which brought about equality and inalienable rights for all citizens and religious tolerance. Napoleon felt by completing these actions it would ensure the gain of power back to France. In order to show his authority, he initiated numerous wars with neighboring countries so that he could later form alliances after having defeated them. Several countries refused to become allies, such as Britain and Russia. Their refusal led to war among these countries, and France was forced to retreat after tremendous losses.
This led to Napoleon's exile and a collapse in government. After all this took place, France re-established a monarchy, and all the efforts of the revolution were reversed. The revolution ended with a shattered government and a country physically in ruins. At the end, the only accomplishments left over were religious tolerance and civil equality. The French Revolution, though a long and bloody battle, did not accomplish all that it was expected to.